Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for the third in our NCID Digital Hub in Public Digital Cultures webinar series on emerging technologies. And I would like to thank both our speakers tonight for joining us, artist Johanna Bruckner, who will be talking to us about AI technologies and her artistic practice, and author and lecturer Dr. Arthur Miller, who will be discussing his own ideas and research in the field of AI and creativity. This talk series is convened by Dr. Rachel O'Dwyer, Visual Culture Lecturer at NCAD, and myself, Elaine Hoey, Artist in Residence at the Digital Hub. And many, many thanks to Anne Kelly, Curator at the NCAD Gallery, who is hosting our event tonight. So tonight we'll be discussing the role of emerging technology and its impact on creativity. Historically, technology has always had an impact and brought fundamental changes to the way we are creative and the arts themselves. And we're already seeing ways in which AI can be used as a tool to augment human creativity, but also the advent of systems such as neural networks, where the machine is beginning to be a participant in the creative process itself. Tonight, we will ask how the creative interplay between humans and machines might evolve in the future, and if a machine can become creative in its own right. We will also ask artists who are exploring what they're critically examining around the conceptual and transformative potentials of these systems as part of their practice. We will begin with a short Q&A or short presentations, followed by Q&A, in which we will invite you, the audience, to ask questions and open up a discussion surrounding some of the themes tonight. Please feel free to add your questions in the chat section. So I would like to introduce our first speaker tonight, author, researcher, and lecturer, Dr. Arthur Miller, whose work addresses some very, very interesting questions around both human and machine intelligence and creativity. Dr. Arthur Miller is Emeritus Professor of History and Philosophy of Science at University College London. He is the author of many critically acclaimed books, including the Pulitzer Prize nominated Einstein, Picasso, Space, Time, and the Beauty That Causes Havoc, Insights of Genius, Imagery and Creativity in Science and Art, and Colliding Worlds, and How Cutting-Edge Science is Redefining Contemporary Art. He regularly broadcasts and lectures and curates exhibitions at the intersection of art and science, and has written for The Guardian, The New York Times, Wired, and Salon. In his recent book on AI and creativity in art, literature, and music, The Artist and the Machine, The World of AI-Powered Creativity, he explores key questions surrounding human and machine creativity in the age of artificial intelligence. You're very, very welcome tonight, Dr. Miller. We're delighted to have you here to kind of talk about your research in the field of AI, and I suppose we're very excited to hear what you have to say about our futures as artists, basically, or one of the futures we're going to have given, the advent of AI. So we'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Elaine, for inviting me to discuss AI and creativity with Johanna and yourself. And I thank all of you for attending, however, virtually. I'll just split my screen now.
I'm gonna...
Okay, now, knock, knock. Who's there? Alec? I like who? I like knock, knock jokes. Well, that's kind of lame, but I'll bet not many of you guessed that that joke was created by a machine. It's a start. Creativity has always been a controversial topic, but even more so today in the age of AI, when it has been extended from humans to machines. And this is what I will speak on this evening, the world of AI-powered creativity. Now, to explore machine creativity, we need to understand precisely what we mean by creativity in terms that are applicable to humans as much as to machines. Since we have to start somewhere, I will begin with the only creativity we know, ours. And my own theory of creativity emerged from my studies of highly creative people. And this has led me to define creativity as a two-step process. One, the production of new knowledge or artifacts from what already exists. And two, this is accomplished by the process of problem solving. Now, indicators of how creative is the new knowledge or artifact is whether it is surprising, novel, complex, or ambiguous. Subjective judgments, to be sure, so they must be handled with care. Now we ask, what are the drivers of creativity? What is the what are the dynamics of the creative process? What is the sine qua non of creativity? I call them characteristics of creativity, and among them are competitiveness, emotions, awareness, and consciousness. In my recent book, The Artist and the Machine, The World of AI-Powered Creativity, I focus on machine creativity with the theme that machines can have human characteristics of creativity and so be creative like us. Machines have already shown glimmers of creativity while running algorithms like AlphaGo, which in 2016 trounced a highly regarded Go master, Lee Sedol. And at that point, everyone agreed that the venerable game of Go, 2,500 years old, had been cracked by a machine. This was a momentous event in AI. Along the way, the machine made a highly original, that is to say, creative move, never seen before. I mean the famous move number 37 in the second of the 5-game match. Deep Dream enables artificial neural networks to create hitherto unimaginable images, while the algorithm generative adversarial networks allows machines to dream, to imagine, to begin to form an inner life of their own. Now there was a human hand behind Deep Dream and generative adversarial networks, the hand of the AI artist. The AI artist is a new breed of artist. The AI artist is artist and technologist rolled into one. The AI artist creates with code. Mario Klingemann is a pioneering AI artist. As Klingemann said to me, human creativity is limited, to which I wholeheartedly agreed, the implication being that machine creativity is unlimited. Here are two works from Klingemann's vast repertoire, two works that he created using generative adversarial networks. He calls them Transcendence 1 and Transcendence 2. They check off all the boxes for creativity. They're surprising, unsettling, actually, novel, complex, and ambiguous. Klingemann considers them to be partway between the painterly and the digital. Clearly, we should not characterize AI art like the previous art, because AI art is the world as seen through the eyes of a machine. Machines are pushing the frontiers of art, music, and literature. In AI-created music, there are collaborations in which musician and AI can bootstrap each other's creativity. One such AI device like this is Continuator, which was invented by Francois Pachet, who is a musician and computer scientist who presently directs Spotify's Creator Technology Research Laboratory in Paris. As Pachet said to me, how do you compose a compelling song? A song that remains in your head and the heads of millions of people. And by song, Pachet included melodies from improvisation. Pachet is keen on jazz. A few years ago, he thought up the problem of how can I increase a musician's creativity while improvising? Solution, Continuator. I'm going to play you a video of Continuator in action. In it, a musician is improvising at the piano. His train of notes is fed to Continuator, which parses them into phrases. And then, like down a pipeline, the phrases are fed to a phrase analyzer, which looks for patterns. And it is along these lines, the Continuator, almost instantaneously, creates an improvisation in response to the musician's improvisation. Now, improvisation is usually considered to be a conversation between a musician and a musical instrument. Here's a conversation between a musician and an AI. Notice I Continuator cuts in seamlessly. Now the musician is on Facebook. Further into this video, when Continuator, more comfortable, so to speak, replying to the musician, it's improvisation become more and more wild, so to speak, adventures. Now let's look at machines as authors, and I want to focus for a while on work by Ross Goodwin, who is a computer scientist, who said to me, "We're on the cusp of creative machines. It seems inevitable," to which I wholeheartedly agree. Now, in collaboration with Oscar Sharp, a filmmaker, Goodwin trained an artificial neural network on hundreds of TV sci-fi scripts from programs such as Star Trek, Stargate, and X-Files. Then he used an algorithm that predicts sequences of words based on what the machine had been trained on. And the whole process for inventing a new script is kicked off by a seeding sentence of the form, to paraphrase Goodwin's, "I don't care what you think, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway." The machine spat out a screenplay, replete with stage directions that they called Sunspring. Sunspring is a sci-fi drama in which the actors deliver their somewhat gnomic lines with passion and intensity, making them make sense. By the way, Sunspring was the first AI scripted movie. Here is a video from Sunspring.
That was a big, honest idea. I am not a bright light.
Well, I have to go to the skull. I don't know.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know anything about any of this, so.
Then what?
There's no answer.
We're going to see the money.
All right, you can't tell me that.
Yeah, I was coming to that thing, you know, because you're so pretty.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's right.
So, what are you doing?
I don't want to be honest with you.
You don't have to be a doctor.
I'm not sure. I don't know what you're talking about.
I want to see you too.
What do you mean?
I'm sure you wouldn't even touch me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Principle is completely constructed of the same time.
It's all about you to be true.
You didn't even watch the movie with the rest of the base.
I don't know.
I don't care.
I know. It's a consequence. Whatever you need to know about the presence of the story. I'm a little bit of a boy on the floor.
I don't know. I need you to explain to me what you say.
Well, you saw this actor spit out his eyeball. That was as per the stage direction, actor spits out eyeball. And actually that stage direction is no more weird than the famous one from Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, exit pursued by a bear. I'm interested in work that explores the borderline between sense and what appears to be nonsense in AI-created prose, such as in Sunspring. Machines are particularly good at this because they can create texts that don't work in the way that people expect language to work. It is in this way that machines can change the landscape of language and so the course of literature, just as they have changed the course of art and music. Now, Sunspring is certainly interesting and amusing, but the algorithm that created it has, of course, been superseded by GPT-3, Generative Pre-trained Transformer. The 3 stands for that it being the third in a sequence of devices. GPT-3 is the most powerful language processing model ever produced to date. It can generate human-like prose. Here is a short film, scripted by GPT-3. Note particularly the introduction.
Hi, I'm Jacob, and this is Calamity AI. The short you're about to see has been written by artificial intelligence. I wrote the first few lines of the script and fed it into the program. When you see a dot appear on your screen, it means that the script is now being written by the AI. We present to you, solicitors.
I'm a Jehovah's Witness,
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't talk to solicitors.
but I have a great story.
Note this, please.
I was a drug dealer. Shootouts. In retrospect, it was a very dangerous job, but I loved it. And then I hit this cop car, and they chased me. I was weaving through the city, but they were so fast. And then I saw a road that led to this alley, and I figured, since I had some time, I could lose them. So I swerved. There were two women in the alley. They were arguing. I was going too fast. They didn't see me. I hit them. And the car turned over and over and over. That's the worst pain I've ever had. But they lived. I didn't. Before I died, God appeared to me and told me that if I would come here and tell you this, then he would bring me back to life. I was instructed to tell you the whole story.
What's your name?
Rudy,
Do you believe in God?
I did once.
Do you want to come in?
I don't want to die.
Well, come in anyway. It's about time for us to do dinner.
That's the worst story I've ever heard. I'm really gonna die. What? What are you doing?
Don't you remember where you met me? And I'm a drug dealer. And shootouts? Shootouts are fun.
He dies. Well, not all that good, but not all that bad either. No particularly the unexpected ending. It faked everyone out. Another glimmer of creativity, perhaps? The script was kind of weird because GPT-3 has problems with word meanings. It is not yet fluent in English with all its nuances and tropes. GPT-3 can generate impressive text, which can be riddled with factual errors, and if left on its own for too long, degenerates into gibberish. That being said, GPT-4, etc., 5, 6, etc., will produce better and better prose. But somewhere along the line, the machine it works on will have to have emotions and consciousness to yield text that is truly human-like. Now, before I move on, I'd like to bring to your attention something about the GPT series that I find amazing. Since they're all neural networks, artificial neural networks, it's numbers all the way down, by which I mean input images, text and musical notes are encoded in numbers. The machine's innards is dense with numbers, mixing with one another, helter-skelter. So I can imagine sculpting with words and music and turning, say, Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon into a symphony. In this way, GPT devices offer means for fusing art, literally fusing art, literature, and music into a new art form. AI is truly opening up whole new vistas. Now, let's pause before diving into the question of whether machines can have human characteristics of creativity and so be creative like us. That machines have already demonstrated glimmers of creativity is a substantial step forward in light of their present somewhat narrow limitations. When we make substantial progress and produce something that goes way beyond the material we have to work with, we call it creativity. Why not recognize the machine's creativity in the same way? Might it be that machine creativity is something to be feared? But why should creativity be an attribute reserved only for us? So for machines to be truly creative, they will have to have what I call human characteristics of creativity. Among them are competitiveness, emotions, awareness, and consciousness. Let's begin with competitiveness, a trait possessed by many highly creative artists. Now, I can sense that some of you are raising your eyebrows and thinking, what is this guy talking about? How can machines be competitive? Let me quote you from experiments done by a robotics group at l'École Polytechnique Fédérale in Lausanne. They write, sophisticated forms of communication and deceptive signaling can evolve in groups of robots with simple neural networks. In other words, we can evolve robots that can be deceptive, can even lie, forms of emotion. Even among robots, there is survival of the fittest. Now, people might argue that machines cannot be truly creative because they are not out there in the world, having emotional experiences like communing with nature or falling in love, but they can acquire such knowledge vicariously. In the near future, machines will be fluent in a language with all its nuances and tropes, and so be able to truly read the web, and in so doing, acquire more knowledge than we can in a lifetime. In this way, they will be able to convince themselves and us that they have acquired such experiences that seem to be essential to creativity as love, hate, anger, inspiration. We will go on to wire them up with complex systems of sensors, regulative mechanisms, and communication pathways, by means of which they will evolve a set of emotions that are duplicates of ours. The big step will be when there is no longer a human in the loop, and machines create art, literature, and music from their own life experiences from end to end. Presently, a stumbling block in creative machines is that they have no awareness. That is to say, they don't have a clue that they've just made a beautiful move in chess or Go, that they have just painted a beautiful picture, and robot comedians have no awareness that they've just cracked a hilarious joke. Then there is consciousness. In the age of AI, the problem of consciousness has moved from the philosophical to the scientific. After wrestling with the problem of consciousness and how it evolves for some years, I have concluded that it results from the data processing of information by the 100 billion neurons that make up our brain. So consciousness is computable. That is to say, it's reducible to numbers. So there is no reason why we cannot program a machine to have consciousness. See my book for further discussion. In the future, I believe that machines will create art, literature, and music of a sort that we presently cannot imagine. But what I can imagine is a future for art in which there will be three strands. One, artists doing conventional art, painting portraits with oil paints, for example. Two, machines working entirely on their own. And three, humans and machines collaborating. So while we should keep in mind big questions such as, can machines be creative? We should also bear in mind questions like, can we learn to appreciate art that we know has been created by a machine? By that time, this may well be a moot point, because by then what it means to be a human will have been dramatically transformed. For are we not merging with machines? And that might not be a bad idea, because that may be the path for survival of the human race, whatever human will mean by that time. Because besides having the potential for unlimited creativity, machines can look into the future, sense problems, and immediately act on them, something that we don't seem to be very good at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller, for that very enlightening talk. We're now going to introduce our second speaker, who has a very different perspective on AI and a different, I suppose, use for it within her practice. And we're going to introduce Johanna Bruckner. She's an artist who is based in Zurich. And Johanna's work relates to ideas of networks and ecologies of trust and care. And she's interested in the conditions of labor that have been emerging in response to technologies of communicative capitalism. She works mainly in the media of video installation and performance, and she's been exhibited widely, including the National Museum of 21st Century Arts, ICA, Institute for Contemporary Arts, Milano, ZKM, Transmedial 2020, the 57th Venice Biennale, Arabic Gallery, MAMCO, and the Museum of Modern Contemporary Art, Geneva, just to mention a few. She was a visual arts fellow at the Istituto Svizzio in Rome and the Academy/Solitude, the Banff Center for Visual Arts in Canada, and she's currently a fellow at the Jan van Eyck Academy. She was nominated for a fellowship at Harvard University, MIT, Cambridge, and has taught at various universities. She received the Recognition Award for Fine Arts of Law Australia 2020 and Rehumanism Prize in Artificial Intelligence in 2021. And we're really delighted to have you here tonight. And I think you guys are, for me, very interesting because you're almost kind of opposites in one way, and yet your kind of thinking will cross over in some other ways. So it'll be an interesting debate afterwards. So I'd like to kind of give you the floor now, Johanna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elaine, and thank you everyone who is here and for inviting me. It's a pleasure to discuss with you. Now I'm gonna share my screen and yeah, I'm gonna start talking about my practice. And please let me know if my internet connection is slow. I can try to fix something, but please let me know if it doesn't work at all. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. And Johanna, if you are struggling with, you can turn off your camera at any point.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, perfect.
Pleasure and desire are technologies which produce value while circulating around the globe. Central to my work is the following thought. The libidinal value that underpins the present economic and social order has the inherent potential to break with and redistribute its value from within. We each have access to our body's own effects, affects, and what happens between them. It is the aesthetics of transcorporeality that is shaped in between. My current work circle, film lover, sci-fi, and crushpad lover, consists of multimedia collages of darkroom sci-fi, queer AI-based post-pornography, and the social bonds of extraterrestrial bodies. The images you see here are all video stills or installation views. I understand net pornography in terms of its effectively interwoven corporeality formed between sensation, technology, and labor within the internet. Bodies are inserted into the production process as mechanical human engines forced to move to the rhythm of the machine, the internet. The use of artificial intelligence in net porn is a consequence of specific sociological and technological features of the information society, and can be subsumed under capital as a source of surplus value. Internet porn is built on exercising, stimulating, or empowering the human ability to create common intelligence through investments of affect. My research, therefore, is based on net porn practices that conceive of their cyber performances as materializing agencies on the internet and perceive themselves to be prosthetic forms of cyber struggles. I'm now gonna play the video while I keep talking, and I'm stopping my video. To be more specific, net porn produces endless data streaming, the principal element in my visual performative collage. And for me, one of the most interesting aspects here is the net porn data that dissipates becomes lost and or fails because it is outside the spectrum of the usable, the climax. Such as data subtly refuses to be corralled into the confines of a hollow-out, precast sexual identity. The data of digital failure, the data which leaks out, which ducks under the fence and finds the unbounded space, taken as a whole, constitutes transcorporeality as a fragile, unstable nucleus radiating a decomposing force, constantly breaking down and resurfacing elsewhere. My collage envisions the potential of digital failure as a refusal to submit to contemporary data-valent society. Digital failure reveals how data itself is a flawed concept, while with its roots in political abuse and social engineering to protect the interests of a few, while keeping the marginalized over-surveilled and underrepresented. The images that I aggregate in my work are characterized by troublesome data that finds its way between the cracks in digital governance and dissipates into the unproductive. My collage celebrates runaway data that is prone to misidentification by digital markers, coders, and content moderators, and it lauds data predisposed to backtalk, showing playful irreverence. Following Lauren Pritchett's, I call these data fugitive, trans, and queer. Bodies talk back in an assemblage of datagrams, a cybernetic rupture as material semiotic social aggregates that allow us to retreat back into and move within the interior states of machines. These data are inventing rather than representing. In my installation, I invest this non-existence data in its vibrating aggregates of waste in invisible transition. These data exist in patterns that form themselves while aggregating into bodily material in continual metamorphosis as bodies of endless formability whose non-existence gives way to existence. The performativities in the emerging collage responds to specific porn practices and collectives that take up these non-usable data and create intelligences that transition while responding, looking in particular at the US, but also at my current country of residence, the Netherlands. They invent bodies that are transpresent in the internet, demonstrification, that is to say, they're dissolving into and merging with the virtual electromagnetic field around them, becomes the antagonistic opposite of humanization. These are the bodies of non-participation in a formal labor market. These are the bodies born of displacement, alienated from social relations inside and outside of porn. These bodies are polymorphous prostheses. They are more than human. The specific post-porn bodies with which I am in dialogue create their own platforms by controlling production, editing, distribution, and access. As part of their struggle, they train an AI to liberate the queer class from libidinal servitude. This is an AI of dissociation, in the sense of neither feeling nor being made to feel. Dissociation is a central concept in trans circles to describe complications with linking personal experience to the social world. The queer AI reproduction is inscribed into the collapse of relationality, yet it is not unspeakable because it does not collide with the language of others. The AI net porn bot learns of data randomness and of failed data in transition. This learning is shaped within the incalculable molecular pornographic realms of interaction between bodies and the internet. The AI learns through the layers of patterns in my collage, which are not mixed and sometimes even not matching. They sound each other out from a distance within the space. The dissociative style is a comment on form itself, that is, on the non-violent synthesis of divergences and contradiction. Value comes into existence as something that both derives from and informs social relations, but is also separate, an element in its own right. Or in other words, the weak links in the chain are the links in the chain, as Maxi Wallenhorst puts it. The fugitive porn, AI, queers this emerging intelligence, its software and access to it. An AI in transition requires social environment of the transitioning person to co-transition. In this way, transitioning forcefully collectivizes desire outwards. What results is not data, but rather the evocation of the physical presence of infinite space, perhaps suggesting an analogy with mental internal spaces. However, here it is an outer rather than inner space, reflecting, for example, the potentially infinite numbers of subdivisions between 0 and 1. So now you have seen a couple of collages, which I extract from my actually 5 hours material, which I've now gathered, which I gather in many layered processes, also through mechanics and mechanic programming and artificial intelligence. And now I would like to go further and talk about the next work, which is atmospheric escape. So against this backdrop of developing AI for external space, the capacity to escape, to rearrange the individual social sphere by transforming together with others has become a central theme in my video and sound works, atmospheric drafts and intimacy, atmospheric drafts of intimacy or atmospheric escape. Gases escape into space and form extracorporeal bodies. Toxic mercury forms bodily dextrose through collisions between light energy, solar energy, and planetary winds in the orbital terrains. These are further stimulated by the Anthropocene-led forces of carbon dioxide and extraterritorial white supremacy, by the resulting waste, and by the particles of black gases from nanotech-driven production. The bodies that are energized by the tension between atmospheric drag, the fluidity of their constantly changing aggregates, and indeterminate prosthetics guided desire. I call this performative state polymorphous care or polymorphous desire, in that it depicts possible future decolonized worlds, languages, and practices of care that lie beyond the recognizable and intouchable.
Beyond others. However, long before the sun reaches that limit, hydrogen escape will have desiccated our planet. Earth will then have been transformed into a desert, with the sun be bright enough that all the remaining water evaporates and the greenhouse effect strong enough to melt the rock. I prefer to give granite minerals, as I'm fond of their life cycles, as a means of passing the passage of time. Like a gentle black hole, soft pulling at my insides, slow and steady, I carve the dark as it hides my fear. Our desire for the more than possible. Feel the breath when I breathe, feel the pain when I push, so cold and tight to the touch, like the melted ice frozen. Comets open our mouth in thirst, watering our neural pathways woven by billions of lives in crisis, as timeless aggregates world-making from those in crisis, against the violent normalizations of universal claiming to speak for the particular. Embodying the centers of screaming on the ways we want to live, nourishing these frozen roots for centuries to come. We are wires for transmission, wires as metabolisms of transitional embodiments made of black affect, prediscursive intensities that confront others' death, hypercoma, more than proxy gas, in a bleak post-nuclear landscape of revenge and irradiated monsters, radioactive waste masks the sober reality of consciousness. Outlines the sun rays came. The body in front of me is faceless, facing the sky. We are delayed in Minneapolis due to the fog in Philadelphia. The sun is slowly brightening at a current rate of about 10% per million years, destined to become a red giant in some 7 billion years. However, long before the sun reaches that limit, hydrogen escape will have desiccated our planet. Earth will then have been transformed into a desert.
So the last work I want to speak about today is molecular sex. Here you can see installation photos from a show in Beijing. Algorithms extract information from the microstructures of bodies, explore the genetic engineering of sex, and form the basis for the invention of new physical and artificial bodies and the performance of their sexualities. The imagination of sex is one of sex as design. Artificial intelligence shapes the human experience of pleasure through technical interventions, such as robots acting as erotic partners, where feeling is converted into a technosensory product. For the video installation Molecular Sex, presents a fictional sex bot aimed at liberating normative technology-led worldviews of intimate relations, and which mutates into various entities during the video. First, it performs both with a brittle star, a deep-sea animal whose body is a metamorphosing optical and sensual system. The brittle star's morphology is shaped by an intertwined skeletal and diffuse nervous system. It constitutes a system for visualization, since its epidermis consists of entirely microlenses. As an animal without a brain, being and knowing, materiality and intelligibility, substance and form collapse into one another. Its corporeality is not a matter of being specifically situated in the world, but rather of being of the world in all its dynamic and queer specificity. Second, it performs as the host of the Wolbachia bacterium, whose survival is due to temporary alliances and symbiotic attachments established with different target bodies of various species regardless their sex. The bodily fluids of the symbiotic composition accumulate into something like smart bombs for aleatory speciation. Third, the sex bot seeks to transcend the biological sexual Y chromosomes, identifying with a gender fluid individual, since molecular gene research has discovered that the future of sex determination involves an array of sexual variations and practices. This work materializes in an instant flow of plastic bodies that dismember, recompose, and multiply. I particularly focus on bisphenol A, BPA, whose presence in large proportion threatens the endocrine system, affecting sexuality and fertility. The bot develops of an AI that stores information in the bot's body, through which it learns to perform as an aleatory intra-participatory sexual species. Its training is based on data sets, which interactively generate datascapes of pleasure. And which are again linked to and placed within the existing infrastructures of computing, while also redefining access and connection within computing. Rather than encouraging data's permanence, these emerging interactive datascapes promote polygamy, polymorphism, and randomness. The code opens up in networks as yet unknown central affective knowledge, an eternal nexus of feedback within the symbiotic entanglement between body, sex, and technology, toward a polyrhythmic cyberspace. Here, the algorithm serves as a means to go beyond language labels and imagine multiple datascapes within which bodies and multi-species relationships come to life. Yet, beyond potential computer software applications, our alignment with the interaction of brittle stars has most meaning through the fractured and infected subversion of our standing of and participation in networked realities and technological transformation in which we move toward entangled forms of mutually effective participation. The brittle star, Wolbachia, and the classification of the world provide examples in which the immediacy of molecular agency can be observed as intrinsic to the non-human domain of cells and bodies. From observations of cellular behavior, a cell's metabolic networks, meshworks, and protein folding seems to be speculative materiality in acted processes, since they do not exist beyond their relation to matter, which is, for writer Karen Barat, an aleatory agential process constituted through reciprocal self-touch. What is more, the regime of financial valorization through biosecurity is an unstable state of affairs, as it is almost impossible to invent an unspecifiable futurity within the molecular realm of economic calculation. The point of the cyberdoll now is to understand the materializing effects of how boundaries grow between humans and non-humans and its social implications. So the sex bot proposed in my work aims to bring to the surface the underlying micro-agencies that are enhanced in the machinic relationship between body, desire, and matter, and which constitute the multitude of precarious bodies whose molecular joy represents the raw material of intimate cognitive capitalism. And now I will show you an excerpt of this video. The bodies in these performances function as allegories for our social systems as they propose social organization beyond class boundaries and exclusions. The multiplicity of afferent bodily materials as sentient compositions offer space for the emergence of new demands on state and private sector organs through the collectivization of semiotic sentient minds. My work pushes the boundaries of the human sensorium and aesthetically, conceptually, and performatively invents technological prostheses that reimagine and redistribute the relationships and patterns by which subjects comprehend the world. It seeks to participate in the possibility of creating systems in which future toxic and libidinal orders can find a place to practice modern human networks as shared temporalities. It seems to me that humanity's most pressing requirement is a political order that corresponds to the corporeal technoscientific practices, one that is not constrained by law, property, and nation, but is open to a performative play beyond the current appropriation of life into the geopolitical biological apparatus. Actually, am I finished with time, or do I have 2 more minutes?
No, you can go ahead for another few minutes if you would like. Yeah.
So, I would like to conclude this my presentation with an extract from the poetically framed text of the 3rd channel of Molecular Sex. Because it's a 3-channel installation, and here I've only shown a short excerpt of channel 1. Among with them, the sex robots of the Cubotics app, we might find a way to inhabit the extinctions that constitute us, the extinctions of the Earth, through geopolitics, our own extinctions. You and we will find the language to situate our being as a project of liberation, finding the wisdom to exist, resist, and strive for life within the toxic. These lines are co-authored by the robots before me, by the aliens beside me, by the aliens to come. Why the lights of the Silicon Valley blinds us. The morning fog smells of Wacholder and wolves staring at me. As nanotech and synthetic processes impact our sexual bodies in geopolitical metabolisms, our Cubotics app is developed in conversation with NGOs. As the bodies that are born in this era are exploitable labor force and assembly line, as factory compounds with no human rights on account of their not being fully human, as their genetic information includes 0.03% of carbon and Wolbachia genetic code respectively. Nation states have dissolved under a group of corporations such as the Pacific Economic Union and the Libidinous World Metabolism, which includes the Women's Major Group. All enclosed corporations with NGOs such as the ESG Group, among others, the group claims that the production of the world through nanotechnologies needs to include the consequences for future sexualities, genders, and their rights. The Women's Major Group demands the corporations to think about infrastructures of these conditions in which living as intersex with toxicity and merged non-human organs are reality. In fact, the sex robots of Cubotics, named Cassandra, are a super toxic chemical irritant, the latest in crowd control technology. Our organs are more and more made visible by replacing the skin with a transparent silicone and TPA composite. To show the new body formations that the plastic microbe tech DNA code is doing on us. How will I be able to remember your embrace? Synthetic love lasts forever. Now I have a little bit more on how I work, but I think I will skip this part. So yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm done with my time, no?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you just close down your screen now, that would be great. And I can turn on my camera. Thank you very much, guys. There was 2 very, very different perspectives on, I suppose, the role of artificial intelligence and the future of creativity, and kind of speculating about the future of kind of AI or AI technologies. I think I have a few questions, if that's okay, to kind of throw to both of you. The first one, though, is for Johanna. You use the AI as a tool to speculate on new forms of being and also new forms of knowledge, particularly in relation to identity. And I suppose I'd like to ask you, about the use of kind of speculative thinking and how the algorithm serves as a means to go beyond what we understand as identity now.
Yeah, I think I do this usually in temporary social settings that I create as an organism by inviting specific performers into specific contexts wherever I work, where my research is based, for example. And in these settings, we develop actually these conditions that support the language of in-between, of affective in-between, affective languages that set up the poetic structures of movement actually from bottom up, from the material that we put into these organisms or ecologies. So it becomes actually a kind of xenosemiotics, if I can, well, if I may use this term. It's actually, it's data, or it's knowledge transformed into data by affecting forces that go back, that are polymorphous, go back, and that are indeterminate for a certain period of time, that are not being appropriated by capital or other dominant systems into a form of code or value. So I believe in this xenosemiotics as a resistant force, but also this xeno, for me, is very important to, like, xenos alien, it means alienating. And when we talk about machines and alienating machines, or and how they alienate us, it's very important to think about who, like for whom and for what purpose. And so this data that I put into these organisms with my performers and dancers, they question, like, in terms of their effective output, what kind these starters are, what language these are that actually symbolize the AI, but the AI in terms of materializing of under which circumstances and which conditions it works for whom, and for whom it serves and for whom not.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting kind of perspective on kind of thinking about AI and kind of speculating on, I know you're critiquing it, but you're also kind of using it in a really interesting way, almost like against itself in a sense. You mentioned in your talk about kind of failed data as a kind of a part of the process. You know, I think it was when you were talking about all net porn, but it was kind of failed data. And I'd just like you to, maybe both of you, to talk about this idea of data, the input, how things are input. And I suppose you see kind of data, you're generating your own data. And I suppose, Dr. Miller, where would you consider, like, the AI that you describe as much more, I suppose, in one sense, hopeful in a sense that you see it as some kind of maybe savior for society, or a benefit, whereas there is definitely two schools of thinking there about kind of AI.
Yeah, I'm a techno optimist.
You really are.
With some you know, with the brakes on every now and then, of course.
Okay.
Failed data, sure. All of the bots we put into action and all the data that we use in AI are scraped from the web. And so they contain all of the racial and gender slurs that exist out there, unfortunately. There are two ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is that, well, that's the way we are, so we're going to bring up machines to be like us. So they will, of course, also have these biases, but they will also have a set of morals and ethics that we will build into them, just as we work by a set of ethics to be careful about what you say, be careful about how you think. We are right now the makers of the machines. There will come a time when they will generate themselves. I was, of course, very amazed at the videos. There were absolutely spectacular videos. I didn't quite see how AI entered as a tool. AI entered as a speculative literary device. It seemed to me a social critical analysis device. It's also a couple of other points that Johanna might want to reply to, is that predicting into the future more than 5 years is a risky business these days, because things are moving faster than the Darwinian timescale. I mean, we ourselves, who knew 20 years ago that the world, the technical world and the social world, of course, would be like it is today. I'll just close out what I have to say by noting that I always like to think along the following lines, that we don't have to go to Mars to encounter alien life. It's right next to us, and we're merging with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So in terms of the art of failing, it's important to yeah, we are part of it. We are failing. The machines are failing. We are failing. But also important to acknowledge why these are failing. So I think
why are the machines failing?
Yeah. No, I think for me it's important to acknowledge that. So we live with machines. I'm not. Well, I have a critical perspective on AI, but at the same time, it transforms our lives and it transforms also accessibility. And it, as I mentioned in the first work, like I used also in the sex robot in molecular sex. It has a function. It tries to queer how we become part of technology and how technology determines our lives. Be this offline or online. So I think, we question how we train things. And I think failing here is an important concept.
I agree. And I think as well, just on both your ideas, one is this idea that, we create kind of human intelligence on a computer. It kind of leaves out one of the most fundamental parts, which I think your work addresses, Johanna, is the body, the physical, psychological, and political aspects of the physical body. And I think that, how do you kind of address that tension with your thinking, both Dr. Miller and Johanna, because you deal with non-bodies and human bodies. And also, I suppose what you're talking about in one sense, but now forgive me if I'm wrong, but you were kind of hinting at singularity at one point in your talk, or this idea that we merge with systems, and where does the body fit into that? And I think that's what I kind of like about your work, Johanna, as well. So I think there's a tension there, which I really enjoy, that kind of pull between the technological body and the human body, and where does that fit into both of your ideas?
Well, they're becoming one, right? Eventually, it will be pretty much one. I mean, the next step is coming quite near, is chips in the head, neural lace placed over your brain so that you become part of the web. It's true, Johanna did bring up points that could be construed to be the singularity, namely nanobots in your body, cleaning out parts of it and taking care of it and living for many, many years down the line.
I think for me, Johanna's work felt more like she was trying to bring the body back into play, the physical body back into, so that the core of all of our thinking around this technology should be the body, should be the human side, and not necessarily the technological side. That's the feeling. You could correct me if I'm wrong, Johanna.
Yeah, I think like the technology, what it produces of ourselves is multiplicities of selves. So selves overlapping, selves are being affective masses that aggregate, form, connect, deconnect, abstract in themselves, and that in these abstractions also find ways out of, for example, certain surveillance mechanisms. So, like in these resistance forces that have this agency that I'm very like to describe with Karen Barrett, the micro agencies, micro affinities within matter that is performative. This performative matter, but also only because we are there. So there's a queerness between the matter and the outside, so the environment, the virtual. And this kind of affective mass, I would say that this polymorphous affective mass that shapes itself in many directions, at the same time also dissolves our screen reality, so it goes back into like our affective machine. So it's in a sense, it's a virus to our technologies, and a virus that is constantly in metamorphosis. And I think like what is stored in technologies actually is mostly affective data, like experiences, aesthetics, and those have the capacity to break. If we consider affect theory, for example, where affect goes in many directions, it's not just a linear force, but it's polymorphous. So at some point it breaks through technologies, but as one occupying it as a total. I also consider this process actually molecular pornographic. So the pornography is not only in the net, but also like going further than Karen Barrett, who talks about the quantum sexual of matter. But I see this as molecular pornographic processes. yeah, because we are also outside of it, and there's always again the boundary of when are we. It's like we're not constantly transitioning, but there's always again, yeah. So that's why the molecular pornography came in there.
Okay,
So
thank
there's
you.
a lot
I
of-
have two. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I have two other questions for both of you from an audience
A
member.
lot of terms that are being used here: linear forces, molecular pornography. The bodies that you show, Johanna, are those bodies that have been changed, transformed? But what one has to keep in mind is, what is the definition of a human being? You know, that's being gradually transformed. And the bodies that you're considering, I didn't quite get the point. Are they being chemically transformed or technically transformed, or both?
The bodies in molecular sex, or in the first work I was showing?
Either of them.
Like today in general, like, yeah, the sex body on the one hand can be chemically transformed when it comes in touch with certain hormones, but the chemical industry is very much based on actually selling those hormones to make humans more appropriate to certain lifestyle, for example. So actually, yeah, to enhance the body in order to become more than themselves, to certain hormones, and yeah, this sex sport is also changing, but it's part of these processes, while it at the same time, of course, subverses it in like through the data through which it learns. And
so because you write your own data, is that correct? And that goes back to the idea of the failed data, the data being kind of failing in itself, which I really like that idea of just kind of starting off with failed data almost.
Yeah, I mean, the data fail because they're human affections, and these cannot be appropriated, as I mentioned before. They keep indeterminate, at least for a temporary time frame. So these fail because it's bodily material, and I think we always need the body's agency, and not just the micro agencies within matter, or not only the non-human body, but the body that goes like that is there. We need the agency for like political reasons and others.
I want to ask you two questions. The first one is to Dr. Miller, and it's from, I can't actually read it's Consultancy and Development Program. Can I ask Dr. Miller what he feels about the concept of the loop within art, such as seen in fractal art? Is the machine conscious of the act of looping human creation? So I think it goes back to the idea of consciousness that he's asking.
Yeah, I as I mentioned, I believe that machines, they will have consciousness in time. Machines will have emotions and consciousness and volition, so they will truly be artists. And that's the first step, is artificial general intelligence, when machines will be as smart as us. So yes, there will be conscious loops, of course.
Do you think that a machine is capable of understanding motivation and context and even emotion itself? Because creativity isn't just about ideas, perception, analytical thinking, or even self-criticism. It needs
to be
more.
able to truly read the web, machines will be able to define emotions for themselves. And then once they're put as the brains of robots, then they will build up their knowledge by touch, and in a very Piagetian manner, construct further fine structure on their feelings. And they will have love. I mean, soon it will probably be the case that artificial intimacy will become the real intimacy.
But how does that happen without the body?
With the body, well, bodies will be defined differently. Bodies will have emotions, certainly, will have feelings, but there probably, once sex bots, let me put it that way, which are implied by Johanna, once sex bots become real, then there will be definite transformations in male-female relationships. Okay, And in that sense, human emotions may well become mechanical emotions.
Yeah, I do see a spillage at the minute between something like a photogrammetry, highly super realistic human person, you know, within a VR kind of setting with deep fakes and kind of adding like lots of those kind of hybrid technologies together. And you start to see it, something emerging that's actually quite Frankenstein, you know, in its kind of creation and what it's going to tell us about ourselves. And how that kind of sex will be played out on the internet. You know, you'll be able to have sex with whoever you want. You will just take a picture of them off the internet and put it onto a virtual body. It won't have the same experience, but Johanna, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean,
sex
bots already exist. So I've been researching, and I've also invented this speculative app, the Cubotics app. In relation to a company that's working in California and developing the sex bots, and also recently developed a feminist sex bot actually. But still, I think the question remains. How do we train this data? I think it's and where do these circulate? And what means affective data? Like, how do we train, on which experience, on the basis of which experience do we train emotional data, so to say? I'm pointing towards also like the intersexual person, like the intersex bot, because these bots, I'm putting them out there because the future is is not the binary order, binary categorization that we know throughout life, with which routines we actually function. But as I've shown with plastic, changing our even sexual organs, not from today to tomorrow, but rather major structures and other critters, animals that are infect ourselves overall and become more like we spread. We are no longer in the binary order. And so that's I wanted to point out with the varieties of sexualities, also into which the bot is metamorphosing over the course of the work. And also, of course, what the bodies, the performers embody in their choreography. So all these concepts are very important in how these structures of movement are developed. Also, the brittle star, as I mentioned, as a kind of animal that blurs the boundaries between animal and machine technology. So it's very important for me that the sex bot is actually this brittle star, because it breaks out, and this brittle star is a queer animal, and so there are a lot of aspects that are interesting in this.
Well, looking at machines reading the web, they can learn an awful lot of sex from that, as well as emotions from that as well. And if you want to train further an artificial neural network, you can train it by means of backpropagation, which means that if they make an error, the expected result does not emerge, something else emerges, then the emotions or the data, the system readjusts itself so as to achieve the end desire. Okay, so you can that's a way of training machines. I'm not quite totally aware of what Johanna is doing, but that's the way I would think of training a machine.
I suppose that answers that kind of feeds into the next question from Sophia Kent. And she's just asking either of you, is very much around that kind of unethical programming of AI and whether we should be doing this at all. Do we need to go down and create an AI that's super intelligent? And if so, we have to find some way to combat the unethical programming of this, how do we do that? So, for you, Dr. Miller, you do have a more techno-optimistic view. So, do you have that same view of people, of humans who are going to, or corporations who are going to ethically do the kind of work that's there for social good?
Well, there certainly has to be a set of rules, but you don't want rules that will inhibit research. People will oversee research.
Ethical research.
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
You can have ethical research. You can have ethical research.
It's who sits on the committee, sure. But one would hope that with humans is one thing, machines is quite another thing. Ethical research into humans is an old story. But what you want to do is have machines, a set of ethics of machines. How that's going to come about, it hasn't been decided yet. I mean, what the data to train machines on, the Bibles won't do, clearly. So there has to be some other set of rules, so to speak. But the problem here is that somebody is going to be doing this research, and you want to be able to keep a lid on it. You want to be able to watch it, but also bear in mind that somebody's going to do it.
Very true. And it's probably, and for now, it's a human being. Like, obviously, as neural networks grow, they're going to be training each other. I mean, that's obviously the case, but I mean, it'll all start with humans doing that. And I think that's what interests me so much about, like, how much time do you spend, Johanna, building your own data sets and your own doing your own models? Because that's quite a remarkable feat.
Yeah, I do this in bodily languages, basically. So it happens, the feed happens through the body protocols, actually. So that's affective value that is generated in the in between spaces between bodies, and that's accumulation of that value that is actually not accountable, cannot be accounted, is turned into a value that is redistributed in the forms of how the bodies move with it. So they move, like, actually I see choreography as an organizing principle of social organization, and also as a role, as a model for the larger world. So this added value is also similar to the actually value that is happening in gift economy. So if you pass something on to another, so that happens also with the bodies. And I've worked with cryptocurrency also, especially with Holochain, where these body protocols have become important for writing a contract, actually a body contract for partly automated construction site labors in the Hafen City in Hamburg. Wow. Actually the proposal.
Very interesting.
If the construction site workers in Hamburg's Hafen City, that is partly becoming automated, if this value that is produced, I mean, if the automation of the labor force and that financial value that is being saved while this is happening, if a Holochain protocol could help in redistributing this money, and also comes to the question of when the robot is being taxed. So
So some very interesting kind of economic principles kind of coming into your practice. This is a question, actually, and it's kind of related, but bear with me. It's from, and they're curious to know how, I think this is to both of you, about kind of selling work that is built on AI. You know, that is it your work? Is it their work? Is it, so who owns that work essentially, if it becomes, particularly as it becomes more autonomous, and how does that work in that kind of principle that you just spoke about, I suppose, as well, is kind of paying workers and how money and wealth is distributed. Do machines earn money? As basically the question they're asking.
There is an ownership problem with art, for example. Who owns the work of art? And here you have a chain of creation in the sense that you have to deal, who owns the machine, who owns the algorithm, who owns the data, who owns the computer, how different is the output from the input. And behind crypto law is the statement that machines cannot be creative, which is rather primitive, but that's what crypto law is. That's what crypto lawyers do. And now there is selling art, selling files through non-fungible tokens as well, which is done through blockchain, done on the web, done with exchange of lots of money.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative business at the minute. What do you think, Johanna, about, this idea? I mean, I love what you were thinking of, this kind of, you're approaching your work from so many perspectives, and this kind of using of the blockchain to redistribute economic wealth is kind of very interesting. So do you see the work, maybe if you make a piece of work by an AI, does it distribute that funding, or is it your funding, or is it your money? How do you think about that, or do you consider that?
Yeah, in my work where I made this proposal, it also came up that the question was definitely where this money should go. That is, they are from human labor being replaced by machines. We came up with the proposal of a public trust, a public fund. They could, like in this case, could go back to those issues that, especially in Hafenstadt in Hamburg, are not solved by the politics of the new venture logistical Zoom, the new waterfront area. So, for example, in points where it has failed, and I had a couple of this work consists of a couple of chapters, and for example, one was housing and social housing not being fully implemented because there's just big houses where the construction systems were automated and actually didn't correctly respond to the crisis.
I mean, do you see any conflict, Dr. Miller, within your thinking, this kind of more, kind of techno-optimistic idea of artificial intelligence, and the kind of realism of that people will lose their jobs, that the labor market is going to be severely reduced due to kind of jobs being given to AI, as Johanna said, people losing their jobs to AI. So how do you see this playing out, that somehow we're just going to have more leisure time, or are we just going to be really poor, like economically, creatively, intellectually poorer because of AI?
Well, I mean, certainly, probably by the year 2030, it is thought that 50% of the workforce will be unemployed, and their jobs will have disappeared as well. And there will be a hollowing out of the middle class. Poorer countries which assemble computers at a very low price because their labor is low. When robots begin to be in the workplace, those factories will be closed down, say in Taiwan and the Philippines, and computers will be assembled, say, in the UK and the United States. There'll be no more problems. At that point, what has to be the case is that there will have to be perhaps a fundamental income. What would have to be is that robots would have to be taxed the same as people, for example. But again, looking into the future, we don't know what jobs may well be created. We don't know. The jobs that will be created will be, unfortunately, on the upper end. All the what jobs will be eliminated. The why jobs are safe. So there may well be, we don't know yet, there may well be some sort of counter forces, so to speak, that will help the employment market. Although certainly governments will have to take a bigger hand in these groups of people who are unemployed.
Yeah, I think I'll ask the second part of that question to Johanna, if you don't mind. Like the labor market is also one thing, but we're going to be economically, but also intellectually at a disadvantage, I think, in the future if we only buy into an AI system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when it comes to selling practice anyway, in my case, it's a very principled question because I work with others, with bodies, and they together conceptually embody these AIs that I'm talking about, or be it, is it aesthetic? So I'm actually not crafting the AI myself. It's, for me, it's, there's a conceptual part to it. And of course, also the life aspect through the affections I've been talking about, so affective data. But in terms of like there's always a big question also regarding authorship. I mean, it's very clear how I work. There are contracts, and then the people get paid. So and yeah, and then the work can actually be solved, but then it's also the question how and what forms, and also then there. Of course, the labor power is being solved, and also the affections that set up these emerging meanings of spaces in between that also make up the work in its poetic aesthetic structure. So that's, I think, yeah, there's always a lot that actually fails because we're in the market system where just the work again has a product, and when galleries approach me and want to buy this, there's always a new question of how it's being solved. But like all these data that go through and dissipate and get lost, but still make up the work because they make up the poetry in terms of how we produce the work. There is no, but which is also very important that this is not there's no value or no, there's no connection, no connection point kind of. So it fails them.
Okay, I think, yeah, we're going to finish up with one last question maybe, and I think I need to just ask both of you really is, what do you see the future as, just given that this is a title of Speculative Futures, what do you see the future for art, the role of artists, the role of creativity within society? Are you optimistic about it? Are you kind of saying, that this world doomed, I'm going to lose my job as well? Or do you see it as kind of aiding society?
I'm absolutely optimistic because our creativity, human creativity, will be increased from working with machines. Each one will bootstrap the other's creativity. So in that sense, I think all will be well. It will be a better world for health. In fact, one of the main dangers with AIs is lack of AIs in running hospitals. Look what happened with COVID. AIs were indispensable towards finding new vaccines and fast too. There will be driverless cars, which will one day be on the road, save 100,000 lives a year, 50,000 in the United States. It said 250,000 in China a year. So yeah, AIs will improve our quality of life.
Would you let an AI operate on your mother?
Sure.
Okay.
AIs will replace doctors. White collar jobs are also at risk over here. I mean, there'll be nanobots to put into your body and clean it out. There'll be no more invasive surgery. So in fact, surgery won't be necessary for an AI to operate on your mother. AIs are operating right now.
Yeah, I know they're already doing it in kind of very particular ways. So the final word goes to you, Johanna. What do you feel about the future in regards to this technology?
So definitely, I'm not a pessimistic person when it comes in relation to my practice. I'm optimistic in the kind of aesthetics and poetics that I produce in the labor that we do together. The models we create, the infrastructures we want to set out there. So like there's a lot of imagination, like it should trigger imagination, like the possibility for other thinking structures in society. So, and I think we live with machines, and machines depend on us. We are part of machines. So this is absolutely true and necessary. It has been since a long time. And these machinic assemblages are very important for ourselves moving as monstrous masses, as resisting within monstrous forces, as becoming more than what is the legitimist category, the Western category of human. And so I think, it's very important that technology transforms our abilities of what it means being human. So, and to recognize, of course, the deficit of the category of the human as it has been celebrated for centuries. So I think, it is very important that the machining is there, the technology is there, but I have always the open question, like from what point, from what position does the AI serve and to whom and where not. And I think here needs to be a lot of the communication needs to be politicized. And if we can do this in the future, to create the links between where it serves and where not, and also to politicize this in between, like take it up and shake it and ask for the conditions of what these in-betweens are. I think then it's very important, of course, to go further in what the technologies do with us in our lives.
Thank you very much to both of you. It's been a really interesting debate. I love the fact that you both have you're coming out from very different perspectives, because that creates healthy dialogue and healthy debate, and also asks me lots of questions. You know, you pose lots of questions to yourself. So I really appreciate both of you coming. And that's it. I want to say good night to everybody and thank everybody for kind of their questions and for joining in the conversation.